So I wanted to do a little bit of a reflection on some ideas on what you can do as a teacher to motivate students who are just not engaged in class, are struggling to stay motivated. Well, first of all, you got to remember that behavior is a form of communication. So if a student is not engaged, I'd like to believe that kids want to learn, that humans are innately curious and driven, and they want to have their lives be better. If we're not in that place, it's usually because there's something preventing a human from being in that place. Physical needs, emotional needs, psychological needs that may be hindering someone's ability to engage. And that should be the assumption. The first assumption you have should not be that the student is lazy, but that there's something going on that you got to get to the bottom of. And usually, what it takes is basically asking the student and being like, what are some of the things that you want to achieve? What is it? What are your goals for this class, for your life? But even that is a little challenging because the student might not really care about the future. They might be very present oriented. It's very common, especially on younger students, that they're not going to really get motivated by something that's going to happen really, really far away. So while it helps to get them thinking about those goals, you really have to address what's happening right now in their lives and try to get to the bottom of that and making a connection to them so they can trust you to say that sometimes is probably what you need. And uh, ultimately, it might require a village to solve those kinds of issues. You might have to talk to their parents, find out what's going on, see if there's some insight they might have. You might have to talk to a trusted adult. And sometimes you can ask the student, who is someone who knows you well that I could perhaps talk to try to understand what you're going through. It might be something about that you might need to refer them to a social worker or a psychologist or a school counselor, someone to help you do this. And eventually, if you try a lot of the things I'm going to say in this video and it doesn't work, then it may be the case that it might just be the kind of situation where you have to refer them to a formal MTSS process. So the whole team can work together to try to figure out different strategies that you can put in place to try to help the student. But some of the things that I've seen be successful in the past, aside from just giving a space for the student to be heard, so you can find out what are the things that are actually in the way, is some things you can put in place in the way you conduct your class so that you can make it more motivating for students. So the first thing is to give kids hope. If they're behind, a lot of times kids just shut down. It's like, what's the point of trying? I'm just going to fail anyways. And a lot of teachers think that they're preparing kids for the real life by having very strict grading policies and late policy assignments, which are very punitive. And it's like, oh, I got to have high standards. In real life, they're going to face those situations. And you might be surprised to find that even in real life, it's not as clear cut as you think it is. Now, in some cases, it is. And I agree, people rely on you, and it's not a good thing. You have to develop those skills of being trusted, of keeping up with deadlines. I agree. But uh, at the same time, if you close the door on a student having a path to get to improve and pass and even perhaps thrive, you shouldn't be surprised if they're not trying anymore, right? So instead of having policies that give penalties or deduct points from their work, which even if they do great work, they still don't get full credit, you can have a different category or a different grading space where you actually report the habits of success or the behaviors that the student engages in and make that separate from their actual academic grade. And some schools actually choose to have report cards to have the class grade, the academic grade, and next to it, you have the habits of success grade. And this is something that actually a lot of colleges like to see because they can see not just that the student actually has the skills and that they need to, they should have learned from the class, but also what kind of behaviors that they display throughout that class. Um, so I tend to not grade behavior, right? I tend to grade what they know. And so that makes it so that there isn't a place for a punitive grade because of a late assignment. At the same time, like I have a limited time myself, so I have to kind of limit the whole idea of them turning in a bunch of work all at once for me to grade, and then I can't make up for it. So I will say things like I will only accept one assignment a day, so that they can't just like in the very end of the semester procrastinate and throw everything in. So there's always hope, but if you leave it for too late, you might just not have enough time, and that is realistic, right? It's like respecting my time because I can't physically grade all of that all at once. But you still do give them hope always. I will always take your work, and I will help you find whatever assignments are the most high impact assignments so that you can make the most improvement on your grade, or not even it's not even about the grade, so you can actually demonstrate me uh, as efficiently as possible how much you actually know. Another thing that I would do is that I will have usually for assignments that I can't accept late, maybe something to do with test security or an assignment that depends on another or something like that. I will provide students with alternative work. And sometimes the alternative work can be more challenging. It depends. And that again is where the realistic expectation comes in. If you have a business and you have clients and you start being late, right, and not being reliable, you're going to have to work harder to earn back the trust of the community that you're trying to serve. So that's realistic, right? So I sometimes will have it, but of course I won't make a bar so much higher that they just give up. So like I'm not even going to try. That's so much harder. But it is going to be perhaps not the same as everybody else did. You're not just going to be able to get to look at the work somebody else did and go with it, or even do the same work they did, because otherwise it wouldn't be fair for all everybody else who did do it on time. So you got to do something else now. You can't do the same thing everybody else did. So I actually like the idea of accepting late work with alternatives. But I only do that for assignments which are time sensitive, or where it really does matter that you prepare for time. It's like I want to be fair to the people who studied for the deadline, right? So if there's a test, you shouldn't get the same test they got because they studied for that in the timeline. You should get something different, uh, perhaps a little extra challenge to make up for the fact that you did it late. But you do have a path, and I'm not going to make it so much harder that you can't make it. And so when the student doesn't turn in an assignment, we usually, instead of having this, I will put an F on your grade book immediately, right? So that it sends a signal of how failure you are, right? Instead of doing something like that, what I will do is that I'll try to talk to them. I will send them an email, or I'll put them aside in class and say, okay, what happened? What's going on? How come you didn't do this assignment? And it's often the case that you just forgot, or they don't have a system to keep track of the things they need to do, or they didn't put the time after school, or that's not a habit that they have to kind of catch up when they don't finish something. They just don't have a system. They're not organized. And sometimes it's a motivation thing, but they don't care to actually do the assignment, or life got in the way, right? The first thing that I said. So it could be a lot of different things. So instead of just being punitive, I try to actually do it that way. In fact, this actually aligns with something else that I do, which is I like to give kids opportunities to fix their work based on feedback. So if I'm doing a project or even a test or a quiz, I'll ask for corrections, or I'll offer a retake if it's too many errors, and then we'll actually sit down and make a plan to prepare for that. So if it's a project and you made mistakes, I'll give you feedback and I'll say, how long do you think you need in order to turn that in? So the same thing applies here with late work. I will do something like, well, you didn't turn it in. You told me why. It could be a lot of the reasons like that I mentioned, and then some. But whatever the reasons are, say, okay, now how can we prevent these things from happening in the future? What is some of the strategies we can put in place so that you don't forget next time? What are some of the things that we can make sure happen so that you do have the time, or you do choose to spend the time to catch up when you don't finish something? Once we address those issues so that we don't repeat the same things in the future, then we come up with a plan for, okay, so what are we going to do about this assignment? I don't want you to keep faltering and keep falling behind. I want you to prioritize the current work as much as possible, but I don't want you to fall behind on this either. And especially since I tend to teach classes where the previous work kind of is important for the future work. So there's got to be a push for them to do that mastery, right? To do, and I might need to do some reteaching, provide them with resources to make them able to complete that, because it's often the case that sometimes they don't do it because they didn't get it right. And I kind of blame myself for that, because I should have caught it earlier that they hadn't gotten it, that they hadn't understood the assignment, which reminds me of other strategies that you could probably put in place, which is things like chunking the assignments for students and do check-in for understandings. Those kinds of MTSS strategies also motivate students, because it makes the assignments more manageable. But I'll get back to that in a second. First, uh, if I'm having a discussion with them, okay, what is the plan now, right? I want you to make sure that you continue to do the work that's assigned each day, but we'll put this recovery task here on the side, and yeah, I want you to work on it little by little as you have time, right, on your own time. And once in a while in class, I'll give you catch-up time, and the students which are ahead will even have do something fun that day, or they will actually engage in some enhancement activities, right? Or they will actually expand on their knowledge to try to go deeper into the content. The really motivated ones will do that. Meanwhile, everybody else is catching up. So I'd like to infuse that at least once every 2 weeks. I have something like that in my class time to give kids an opportunity to catch up instead of just moving forward. And I might put more time if necessary if I'm noticing that my entire class can't keep up with the pace. Sure, I have a curriculum that I have to cover, but it's more important to me to make sure the kids are learning than just drag them through it and they don't understand anything, right? All right, so we will address what happened. We will talk about what went wrong, what we can do to fix that so that doesn't happen in the future, and then we'll make a plan. And we'll say, okay, the deadline for that recovery is hopefully, I don't know, in another week from now. So I want to see you putting in the time, and then we'll make a plan for that too. What days, what times of the week are you going to put in the extra time so that you make sure that you get this recovery test done? And that is what it looks like when they miss the submission party, which is another thing that I like to do for motivation. Instead of having a deadline that's a hard deadline, I like to give kids this illusion of choice. Well, it is a choice, right? By saying it's like you can kind of choose when to turn this in. The window starts today, and there's a week from today that you can turn it in. If you turn it in earlier, you're going to get better feedback because you're going to be fresh. It's the first people who are reading it. I'm going to be less tough because I've seen less examples. So it's probably a good idea to turn it in sooner. If you turn it in later, you have extra time to prepare for it. You have to have more time to do it. You have more time to talk to me about it. But you're going to have less of my attention with the actual grading. So you don't want to turn it in too late. And sometimes I'll offer bonuses towards their behavior grade if they actually turn it in earlier, because it demonstrates habits of success, that they're being organized and proactive and things like that. So I call that a submission party, the day that the starts, and then after that they have a week to turn it in on while working on their own time. And I like to do that with projects, with quizzes, with tests, as long as there's test security with an app or something like that that I can use. Then going back to what I was saying before, another way to make kids stay more motivated is to chunk the actual work. Instead of giving them this huge assignment that a lot of them will tend to look as like, oh my gosh, I don't even want to try. This is so big, I would shut down. You can give them assignments in chunks. And I have a separate video that talks about how to do this, but there's apps that you can use and websites that actually feed them one task at a time out of the big assignment, something like Nearpod or Desmos. Or you can actually teach them how to engage in a chunking process by doing one step communication at a time and checking in every step of the way and getting feedback, so that they feel that they only have to worry about a tiny manageable thing. That makes it a lot more likely for them to get more of it done. They might not even get to 100% completion, but you might be surprised. You get more completion. Maybe they get 70% of it done really well. And that's usually enough to pass, as opposed to someone that does nothing because they shut down because of the big assignment. I also like to do check-ins, checks for understanding. And I do that after giving directions, after a certain intervals of time, so that I can keep tabs on the students and make sure they're understanding as it goes along. Because what you don't want to do is find out, you give a big project 3 days after the deadline, they don't haven't turned it in. You talk to them, it's like, I have no idea how to do it. It's like, I think that's your fault as a teacher if that happens, because you should have checked in with them along the way and caught up that they weren't actually understanding. What were you doing when they were working, right? And that's kind of the idea there. So I use timers to actually time when they're working, and which also keeps them accountable to make progress, and also makes me remember to check on them so that they can actually be routinely assessed. And I also like to actually have milestones for any kind of big project. So instead of having a big project and say, turn this in next Friday, I will actually break it down into smaller milestones and say, part one is due today, part two, and give them feedback every time a milestone hits. And then if they fall behind on the milestones, there's a little bit of pressure to move them forward. So this is kind of comes from a kind of engineering background, because in engineering, we learn to actually have students um, uh, do project management, right? Where different groups depend on each other. And so you want to actually teach the students to actually be able to um, process things in a streamlined manner so that they can keep up with certain deadlines. And because that teaches real life scenarios, such as those that apply in engineering firms, but in a lot of different jobs as well. Another idea that I have to help kids be more engaged is to differentiate the work. And there's different aspects to that. There's differentiation by choice. In other words, give them choice over what kind of assignment they do. If you vary, you give them options, and they actually sometimes will get more engaged because they feel like I chose to do this thing, right? So they have more buy-in. Sometimes too much choice can be overwhelming, and I do tend to have lots of choices. So then I will do what is called a chef's choice, and I'll give them like two, and I'll say, if you can't choose between the whole salad bar, do this or this. And when you give two choices, kids get less overwhelmed. So that's something that I've learned too. But having a choice empowers the kids to feel like, this guy's not telling me what to do. He's giving me options. So that's good. It's also good to differentiate by level, so that in those choices you have to have something where the kids which are struggling can enter it at a lower uh, risk level, and then they can actually build up to that, and you can work as an educator, as a coach, to try to help them not lowball their efforts and be like, yeah, you could do that, but you are ready for more and you should try here. At the same time, you can also coach them to not go too high on the tiers that you prepared, because that's a really challenging one you're picking, and I believe in you, but I think you might want to start here to make sure you're good. And if you can do this and in 5 minutes, then you're like, no, this is easy, I will stand corrected, and it'll immediately switch to the task that you picked in the first place. So that's differentiating by by difficulty, right? And I also like to differentiate by the actual style of the assignment, right? So like that there's completely different like uh, uh, types of assignments. So not just what I meant before as like different versions of the assignment or different difficulties, but like maybe one thing is like a writing piece, another one is a video that they put together, another one is a quiz that they do, or a project, or a presentation, right? You have lots of different options for them to demonstrate mastery of the same kind of skill, so that students that have different kinds of preferences can actually either uh, do that. And I do that when I try to do this not just for demonstration of mastery, but I also differentiate when it comes to content access. Maybe I'll have a video for some, a presentation for others, notes for others, the textbook. I might have a worksheet that you can learn through. In biology, I like to use Pogos as an example of that. So there's different ways that they can go about accessing the content. Maybe I'll have if they like the lectures, I'll have a playlist of videos, right? That either I recorded or had somebody else that recorded, collected for them. So different ways to access the content. I will have different options for them to practice. You do the questions from the textbook. You can do the Pogo, like I mentioned earlier. You can do other worksheets that I have available. You can do a practice quiz. Different versions of different methods to actually prepare, for the content. You can create your own study tool and study them like flashcards or Cornell notes. I don't care, as long as you're doing something that works for you. And I, again, as a coach, work with them to help them pick something that does. If they try Cornell notes and it didn't work for the last two quizzes, maybe don't do Cornell notes again. Oh, you've read the textbook the last two times? How did you read it? Did you annotate? Did you take notes on it? No, maybe you should try that this time. Oh, you try all of that and it's not working. Maybe you should do the videos, or maybe you should do the pogo. So as the year goes by, you coach them to try different things until they find something that works for them to access the content, to practices, and to demonstrate mastery. Differentiate, give student choices, and they might be more likely to feel like they have power, right? And so that's kind of the idea there. Another thing that I like to do for differentiation is give them choice over working individually or as a group. A lot of kids get motivated if they work with a partner, and others don't like working with other people. So that could be another way that you differentiate and give choice. And sometimes I do make them work together or make them work individually because you have to, right? Because in real life, you've got to learn how to work with other people. That's just the reality of life. But most of the time, I'll give them choice over how they want to do the work, so that again they feel empowered and they feel like they have that they can do something that motivates them in that sense. Some kids will just kind of brighten up if they can work with a friend, as long as they get productive and work together better than they would otherwise. Sure, go for it. As long as you're not just cheating from each other, you're literally collaborating in a way that works. And I teach them how to do that as well. Another thing that you can do to make your classroom more motivating is be smart about the way that you intervene with uh, off-task students. So I work online and I use Go Guardian and I do a series of interventions that they're tiered interventions, right? So I might start with just like putting a dot on their screen that says, like, hey, I'm watching, you're not on task. Uh, I might send them a message if I realize that they're off task, or am I actually put an announcement on their screen that they have to click and acknowledge, or am I straight up call them or lock their screen? There's different tiers, all right, of intervention. And just like in the classroom, you would start with like, uh, you know, maybe walk by them, or maybe sit next to them, or maybe put a little hand near them, or maybe put a post-it next to them with a little message. Lean not down to them and straight up talk to them. Invite them outside into the hallway to have a conversation, right? Call their parents while in the hallway, in the spot. There's tiers, right, of what you would do. And those tiers can be done kind of online or in person, depending on what you do. But you've got to be smart. And even before you do any of that, I like to do indirect corrections by actually praising the people who are doing the right thing. So I might actually want that kid to stop eating during class all the time, to the point that they're not doing any work. So instead of saying that, I'll say like, wow, Michael, I really love how you time your snacks right before class so you never need to eat during class. I really appreciate that. I wish every student would do that, right? So I'm saying that because of James, but I'm not going to call James out. Instead, I praise Michael. And that helps me keep the environment more positive than I would have if I just kind of called Michael out. And if I had to call Michael out, I would do it in tears like that, and I wouldn't do it in public, not to embarrass them, so that you keep them, build up the relationship with them, and keep them in a positive place. If you are going to actually correct someone, you have to try to create a situation where you praise three times as much as you correct. So try to sandwich the criticism with something good that they do, and finish with something good as well, and put the actual constructive criticism in the middle there, right? So give them some positive feedback in the middle of the constructive feedback, or surrounding the constructive feedback, and then randomly add another positive out there. And you can do that with the thing that I said earlier by calling out someone that's doing the right thing. That allows you to make sure that your environment is more positive than negative. Because if all the interactions you have with the students are those in which you are criticizing them, even if you're not doing it in a vicious way, even if you're not doing it in an intense way, which I tend to do because I'm just passionate and loud and intense, and neurodivergent. So for me, it's like this extra effort to try to do this because it doesn't come natural to me. But it will be hurt your relationship with the student if all you do is negative interactions. And sometimes you find yourself thinking as a teacher, but I can't find something good to say about this kid. Well, they're there, right? If you're correcting them, they're in class. That's something good right there. And if they are paying attention to you, that's another thing. So you could say something like, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm glad that you gave me this opportunity to connect with you. Uh, I'm worried about the fact that you seem to not be completing an assignment right now. And I know that you're the kind of person that wants to succeed. So I want to know what I can do to help you because I don't want this to continue, right? So that's a completely different thing, right? Than just say, how come you're not doing any work right now, right? So there's a completely different reaction. So then you could do that, and you could again start by saying, "Thank you, Samantha, for staying on task, on camera, always doing a good job. You're almost done with the assignment. Wow, that's amazing." That is already going to put shame on the other students, right? Uh, but you're not focusing on the shame. You're focusing on the glory of the other student, on the good thing that they're doing. So that's the positive behavior incentive that you are trying to do. And you can even have a system where you reward that, right? If you want to uh, call special attention to that. Another thing that you can do to create a positive environment is to laugh with them and joke with them, and not joke at the expense of anyone because those jokes never land well. But jokes that just be silly dad jokes. Create an environment that's fun. Be the clown. They usually will tend to enjoy class a lot more when you do this. Uh, Another thing that you can do is know your stuff and also always show that you're willing to help them without necessarily giving them the answers. Keep the challenge alive, but never let them sink. Always feel like you have a lifeguard. I'm right here for you. If you do that enough and consistently and never let them actually drown, catch them before, right? Have something ready to just boom, here's a scaffold. I caught you when you needed it, right? They'll start believing that you care. They'll start believing that you don't want them to fail. So that's another thing that you can do. Another one is that you can be vulnerable with them, right? Let them see that you make mistakes. Let them see that you don't know everything. Deflect being the center of attention when they ask you questions. Be like, huh, how would we figure that out? I don't know. Even if you do know, right? Try the thing that you don't. Try to figure out something that oh, this is a challenge. Cool. We can learn together. Because if you do it that way, they'll be more likely to do it. And also show them that you can have, like, as a person, difficult times and let them see that. It's okay, right? Obviously, there's certain things that you got to keep private, but like it is okay to say, guys, I'm having a rough day, and I just need your help. Moments like that actually help them connect with you and actually care more about you. And also recognize that you make mistakes as a teacher when you do them, and model that making mistakes is okay and that you're going to do better next time. So I have this process that I do daily where I reflect on the things that I've done as a teacher that day, and I often share with the students the next day. It's like, I didn't do a good job with this on yesterday's lesson, but I've learned from that and I'm going to do better tomorrow, right? That kind of stuff teaches the student that it is okay for them to make mistakes because their teacher make mistakes too, and we can all forgive each other and grow from that experience and get and do better. And the mistakes actually teach us more than the actual successes do, because we learn all these things that don't work. And that's how science works, right? Scientists make way more mistakes than do the right thing. And also that reminds me, create an environment where it's okay for kids to make mistakes. Encourage them to make mistakes. Even praise them when they make mistakes. Take every mistake they make and making it a huge learning experience for not just them but for everybody else. Right? That can also help them create a positive environment where they feel like it's okay. If I mess up, it's going to be actually a good thing. Uh, Strategically teach kids to give each other feedback and praise uh, in a positive way or constructive way, so that it creates an environment where they enjoy class, because kids are always patting each other on the back. So during discussions, I actually have other kids in the chat saying things like, wow, good job that you did that. I like how you connected what you said with what the previous person said. So I literally teach the kids and model how that looks like to give each other pointed feedback that actually mentions exactly what they did that was nice. Not just like good job, but like good job. You actually argued by introducing a new point that nobody else had brought in the conversation. Tell each other what they did well, right? And create a positive environment that way. And if you have to correct somebody else, do the sandwich, right? So I teach them to do that as well. Like say something good that they did, finish with something good that they did, and put in a constructive criticism in the middle. Another idea that I have to create a motivating environment is to do more reflections, surveys, and circle time, where you give students an opportunity to share their where they are, with respect to something. So they feel like they have a voice. So something is not going working on your classroom, rather than you just solving it, do a circle, see what their perspectives are, send them a survey, ask them to do a reflection before they survey, so that they can uh, connect with what they are feeling about the situation before you have the circle or before you send a survey, and then act on the survey and actually give consideration to the things that they said. If you can't do what they suggested, or can't validate, or not validate, but can not enact what they actually want, you can at least validate that their feelings are important, and that you heard them, and that it sucks, and that you're going to do everything you can to make it better, even if you can't do exactly what they want, right? So at least they feel heard, and acknowledged, right? And if you have been cashing the bank of choice over many days, of always giving them choices with the assignments, choices with how they group up, and stuff like that, in a moment where you have to tell them, sorry, I can't give you a choice this time, it's okay, because they know that usually you do. So you're going to create an environment that's positive for them, even when you have to do something that's tough for them, right? Um, what else? Do a positive behavior incentive system uh, that actually appeals to them, uh, where the rewards are actually something they care for. Because if they don't, then there's no point in having a token economy or prizes or recognition. So I have students that are not really motivated academically sometimes, and so what's the point of giving extra credit? Besides, extra credit makes it so that their grades don't really reflect what they know. So I don't typically offer extra credit. I'll offer extra opportunities, but not extra credit, or alternative opportunities. So these are just some ideas that come across to me right now, and uh, I've done a lot of work to try to become better at these things. On top of that, there's always like love and logic, which is just a way to interact with students which are showing behavior, really serious behavior problems, which are actually causing distractions for other students. Giving them a recovery time, giving not engaging in arguments or deflecting the argument, and repeating what the instruction is. Uh, Trying to make intentional connections with them with things like I noticed statements, like so that they know that you actually care about them. Doing uh, circle time or connection questions just for the hell of it, to practice academic conversation without actually being academic, so that talking about things that actually matter to them. Give them jobs, right, where they feel like they can be important. Uh, this is, find things that they have in common with you and connect with them in relation to those things. All of that is good relationship building. And so I hope that these ideas of things that you can do to stay motivated, and to motivate them, which also motivates you because it creates an environment that's better, stick with you. And I guess the last one that I have to say, because I'm a science teacher, is create an environment where creativity and inquiry are part of the fun, right? Because I do, like I started by saying, that I believe that kids want to learn, they want to be curious, they do have that ambition of learning. It's the natural human state. That it's when things get in the way that they don't do that. But if you make the class fun, it's like discover, be a scientist, act like those things, then they will feel like truthfully, like it's cool to work together. It's cool to make mistakes. It's cool to talk about things. It's cool to work hard to make discoveries and to share with others what we've learned. Um, and I am part of the discovery process, right? And then I guess the last one that I forgot is that uh, make this something that can connect with the real in real life, right? Make it relevant to them. Make it so create projects where the end product actually affects the community or creates something that can actually make a change in their personal life or the life of those around them. Then it, you know, or at least that helps them understand the world around them in the parts that actually matter to them. If you do that, then they will care more about their learning because they will feel like it actually makes sense. And then connect with the generation, right? Every generation is different, and there's going to be something that you need to do. If you need to make the projects and the tests feel like they're social media, at the time I was recording this video, TikTok or YouTube Shorts is a huge thing. Okay, make them record shorts. Make them have to make it funny, right? Make it relevant to them. Uh, make it a game somehow, right? Lots of them like to play video games. Make it feel like it's a game, right? Actually, use video games if they have apps that actually connect the material that way. Don't try to. Well, you do have to make them work. It does have to feel like work sometime. You can't just make it nice all the time. They do have to learn to work hard and do stuff they don't like to doing it. But at the same time, I like my students to to learn to follow their passions. So if that's something that they're passionate about, how can we make a connection to that? And so it doesn't hurt to try to meet them halfway, uh, and consider what the generation likes, right? Even as you try to push them to out of their comfort zone and actually make them work, right? So school's not fun for everybody, and some of them are just not going to do it. Some of them have passed in life that where academics is not it. Uh, but it doesn't hurt to try. It doesn't hurt to try to motivate them to learn by doing some of these things. And I probably forgot a bunch of other ideas, but I think I gave a bunch already. So I hope you found this helpful. And yeah, I will see you on the next time. Don't do anything that would not make your mama proud. Until then, bye bye.